It's 11:05, so definitely want to get started. We have people streaming in from here and on Zoom, so excited to have a chat with Jared Simon today. Real quick, my name is Anuj, and I am a junior at UT Austin. I'm also a venture partner at Genesis, the organization that's putting on this event. I'm excited to welcome you all today to their Fireside chat. Before we kick it off and before I introduce Jared, I want Nick Spiller to talk for a quick second. He's the lead of marketing at Genesis, and he wants to talk about why we're excited to support youth entrepreneurship and put on events like the one we're putting on today.
Thanks, Anuj, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is really exciting. As Anuj mentioned, I'm Nick Spiller. I spend my time helping entrepreneurs raise money. Part of that, I do that partially as the director of marketing for Genesis. A decade ago, I was at a similar event to this one when I was a UT student. The speaker I was listening to that night was the inventor of the Ethernet, Dr. Bob Metcalfe. And Dr. Metcalfe had very recently been hired as the professor of innovation at UT, and he moved here. And I was listening to one of his first talks. It wasn't even on campus. It was up at IBM. But that night, Dr. Metcalfe shared his vision for entrepreneurship at UT, and he described it in a way where he'd say, Longhorn entrepreneurs need to be as supported and celebrated as our student athletes. And we need to build a culture where we embrace entrepreneurs and don't just have opportunities for individuals to start their own company, but really create a culture across campus where entrepreneurs are supported from really every facet of the institution. And that statement probably changed my life more than most I've ever heard. And it really helped me discover all the ways you can make a living helping entrepreneurs, as well as how you can start your own company. And I hope tonight that something you hear, everyone, tonight will be an insight that can change your future for the better, like Dr. Metcalfe did. So very excited to have Jared speaking. And before I hand things over to Anuj, I want to share just a little bit about Genesis and what we stand for. Genesis is a partnership between alumni and students. Everything we do is aimed at unlocking leadership potential in Longhorn students. We use the tools of entrepreneurship, early stage capital, and our network of industry experts to develop leadership in our portfolio founders and take them from founders to be great leaders. Since our founding only a few years ago, we've invested over $120,000 into 35 student startups, which have in total gone on to raise about $8 million. We're very, very excited about that and feel like we're really at the front end of the impact we're gonna make on campus. So students with an idea or a startup you're working on should visit our website, genesisut.com. And reach out to any Genesis leadership team member you know from your classes or an alumni who's involved. And we'd love to share more. And even if we don't, it doesn't work out and you're not looking for funding, we'd still love to know you and see if we can help by making an introduction or anything like that. And yeah, the last thing I want to mention before we kick it off is really just thanking a few people. Anuj in particular has been spearheading this event as our project manager and has really taken initiative from the beginning. And so thank you, Anuj. I also want to thank Jacob Cordova, who's the managing partner and founder of Genesis. Without his strong leadership, we wouldn't be here tonight either. And then finally, want to shout out the core team that supported Anuj, which is Manu, Aiden, Alaman, and if there's anyone else I'm probably forgetting, I forgive you. But I know Manu and Aiden specifically really stepped up and helped make this happen along with Anuj. So very excited to see that happen. And yeah, so once again, thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Jared, for being here, and Anuj, you can take it away.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Nick, for the introduction to Genesis and talking about UT entrepreneurship. Jared Really excited to talk to you. Before, I guess, I ask you the first question and let you introduce yourself. Here's the background on Jared. He's an absolute star of an alumni of the University of Texas. He's most recently has been the president of Cure Health, which is changing healthcare and bringing healthcare, making it affordable for everybody on the planet. Before joining Cure, he co-founded HotelTonight, served as its COO, and was a member of the board of directors until its recent acquisition by Airbnb. Previously, he was the VP of corporate development at Turn Here, which was an online video production and distribution pioneer. And before that, he was working in the hotel and residential business at orbitz.com and lodging.com. Before any of this experience with startups, Jared worked in corporate finance, investment banking at Credit Suisse. And before that, he was a BA at the University of Texas at Austin and got his MBA at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern. So Jared, super happy to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Although getting compared by Nick to, or bringing up Dr. Metcalfe and trying to live up to that is putting a little bit of pressure, making me a little bit nervous, but I'll let it slide.
I didn't want this to be an easy one for you. We're developing your leadership potential too, Jared. So
wow, just inventing Ethernet.
Yeah, just casually.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's great to have you. To start off, could you tell us a little bit more about your time at UT Austin, and then how you went from college to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's no straight line for me. It was sort of a lot of serendipity and a lot of just doing what I was passionate about at the time. I mean, at UT, I was a liberal arts undergrad. I was in a Palantir undergrad with a philosophy concentration. So, and certainly I wasn't one of these people that was born to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't something I always expected I would be doing necessarily. I actually didn't know what I was going to do, to be honest, graduating with essentially a philosophy degree. And so, but obviously a lot of great companies come and interview at Texas. So I started just interviewing to learn how to interview. I ended up really hitting it off with one of the first companies I interviewed with, which at the time was called First Boston, an investment bank that's now called Credit Suisse. Went to go work for them. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no business doing that. I didn't know what an investment bank was, but found it was a fantastic experience. 2 years, the standard analyst program where you learn everything, you work crazy hours. I learned pretty quickly I didn't want to be in corporate finance anymore, but it was a tremendous learning experience. Fast forward a few years, I went back to school to get my MBA and came out knowing that I did want to get into early stage technology. And that sort of set me on the path toward what you would call a career in entrepreneurship, I suppose.
That's awesome. So around what time did you get your MBA, and what was like going on in the world then that made you interested in tech startups in specific?
I graduated in 2002. And what was going on at the time was meltdown. This was, on the heels of the dot-com crash at the turn of millennium. So it was not a good time to go out and get a safe job out of graduating with an MBA. Those jobs weren't to be had. So it was almost out of necessity that you had to get creative. At the same time, I knew what I was really interested in doing was being around really creative people, doing things that moved really, really quickly and changed frequently. And all of those things sort of aligned to point me in the direction of early stage technology. And as it happened, there was a company that was just getting started in Chicago, which is where I was in school, by an alum of my graduate school. And the company was called Orbitz, which was, maybe I'm dating myself here. I don't know how many people even know Orbitz anymore, but it was one of the early online travel agencies. And at the time, they were air focused. In fact, they were owned by the major airlines. But the money in that industry is made in selling hotel rooms. And so they wanted to spin up a hotel business. And so I joined as part of the team to spin up that hotel business at Orbitz. So that's where I learned that business. And obviously that I took those learnings to start HotelTonight several years later.
That's awesome. So was it kind of going from one to the other, where eventually you were working at this early stage company and decided that, being a founder was in your cards? Or at what point did the kind of switch hit that I should be starting this myself?
Well, I really loved my time at Orbitz, and Orbitz was very successful, and it's sort of a cliche, I suppose, but it was kind of a victim of its own success. And for me, in the sense that I joined, it was a couple hundred people, maybe 100 people, and when I left, it was a few thousand people and very, very successful. And it was not interesting to me anymore. I realized I get my energy at the point in time where you're sort of there's no risk because there's nothing to lose, and you can make really bold decisions, and you're coming up with the sort of foundational concepts for creating a company. Once you prove that out and it starts to work, it becomes a lot more about tweaking and optimizing all of the things that you already know are successful. And that is really challenging and can be very exciting. It's just not where I get my energy. So I knew that I wanted to go back to an early stage once I'd been at Orbitz for several years. Unfortunately, in Chicago, that community didn't exist yet. The sort of early stage technology community didn't exist yet. It does now, but it didn't at the time. So I knew I had to move out west. So I moved to San Francisco and joined a team that was getting started with this video platform that at the time was supposed to be travel focused, which was the tie-in for me, but ultimately pivoted away from travel. Turn Here became, what we did was again, I'm dating myself, but the insight here was that broadband penetration had increased to such an extent at this point that video would start to become ubiquitous on websites. And this was pre YouTube and that sort of thing. And obviously that was a prescient observation. What we did was we said, hey, there are going to be lots of companies who have a web presence who are going to need rich video content to populate their web presence, but that's not their gig. That's not what they do. And particularly if they're large companies with a distributed geographical presence, they're going to need lots of video content from lots of different places. So what we did was we built a network of sort of semi-pro videographers around the world, thousands and thousands of them, and served as sort of a producer and a distributor for content. So companies could come to us if they had a need for lots of different content to be made, and we could farm it out to this network and manage the production process and then the streaming process and things like that. It quickly turned into the key partners for us were these big directory companies. So I'm sure all of you at this point have probably in Yelp seen a listing for a little business, and there's a little video profile in that listing. Turn Here invented that concept, and we created all of those for Yelp and yellowpages.com and all these kind of companies. It was really interesting, but it wasn't lighting the world on fire. And I was getting bored after a few years, and I knew that at this point, I'd sort of done other people's ideas. I wanted to try something on my own. I had a friend who I'd met along the way, who was in travel still, and I called him up. Actually, I was calling him just to see if he knew anybody that wanted to partner up and try to figure something out. And he was like, "Hey, I've got this idea that I think you're gonna like. Let's get coffee." And we got coffee. And the story is, the intervening weekend, I was out with my wife downtown here, and we had a bit to drink at dinner and decided, hey, let's make it a night and let's book a hotel. And literally, we're on our phones trying to book a hotel, and it was impossible in those days because all the hotel booking sites were just websites that had been ported into phones, and they were unusable on that medium. And so we ended up walking to a hotel. I'm sure we got reamed on whatever we paid, but we had a blast that night. And I show up Monday morning for coffee with Sam, and he's like, "Okay, here's my idea: spontaneous hotel bookings." And I was like, "Whoa, something's aligning here." So I was like, "Yes," on the spot. So it wasn't really a reasoned decision that said, "Hey, I want to start something," or "I want to be an entrepreneur," or anything formal like that. It was like, "Hey, I want to do something I'm really passionate about. I want to have a hand in creating it. And here's a great idea. Let's go." And that's sort of the way things have happened more or less in my career.
That's awesome. So you found your way back to the hotel industry, I guess, through a little bit of serendipity and also wanting to be your own boss. What was the point, like, I guess, from that coffee meeting and saying yes? At what point, like in the next couple of months of craziness, did you realize you were doing something right? Was it an instant success? Were you selling things? Were you making a product pretty quickly, or what was your journey like?
It was definitely not an instant success. I'm not sure. I would love to be a part of something like that, although I haven't been before. I'm not sure if that says something about me or what, but it was. But we sort of created. I mean, we'd both been around the block. Sam and I had. We'd done this before. We'd been part of. I was at Turn Here and Orbits and whatnot. I'd seen what could go well and what could not go well, and we sort of knew the way we wanted to run things and build things to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that we'd been exposed to before. And one of the things that that I'm really proud of that we did was we were very, very disciplined about, you don't, if you're starting something, there is no possible way you have any idea whether what you have has any legs at all until real customers are really using it for real. No amount of internal testing or beta testing or free or whatever, any of that can possibly give you the real answer. People have to be willing to trade you something of value in order to use your product, in order to know what you're doing is right, and in order to be able to refine it in order to get it right. And so one of the things we did, as opposed to being in 5 years of stealth or something like that, where we're sort of ideating internally, we said, hey, look, we're getting started in September. We want to ship a full product to the App Store by December. And this is essentially creating an online travel agency from scratch. It's like creating Expedia from scratch. It's insane to think that you could do that in 3 months. But that's the only way we're going to know whether we had something here. So we forced ourselves to start. We started writing code and doing whatever in September. There were 3 of us at the time. One of us worked on product and marketing and getting things ready on the consumer side. One of us wrote all the code, and I was in charge of building the hotel network, the marketplace. And we all went out and did our thing for 3 months. We didn't raise any money, more as a forcing function to force ourselves to finish this thing and get it out there quickly. And then we'd see whether we had any traction. Then we could determine whether we're going to raise money on this. And we did it. We got it out by December. We got it. At the time, you had to get things into the App Store before Christmas because the App Store shut down for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And you couldn't introduce anything new. And the other thing is, at the time, you, as a new app, you couldn't decide when your app was going to go live. Once you shipped to the App Store and they approved, you were live. And so we had to time it correctly so that we had some hotels ready and we had what we needed. Anyway, so it wasn't an instant success, but we forced ourselves to get it out there very quickly. Sure. In order to know whether we had any sort of signal here that this was going to work. And we did get some signal very quickly. We got a lot of buzz. We were punching way above our weight in terms of sort of the buzz among the tech press and that sort of thing. And people were very excited, and we got a lot of traffic, and hotels were interested in all this. We weren't getting any bookings though. And we were freaking out because, like, hey, we've got a lot of interest. People are looking at this, but no one's booking. What we realized is, hey, look, if I came to you and said, hey, I've got a free hotel tonight in Hawaii, want it? You'd be like, yeah, no. And we realized there had to be a use case. There had to be an occasion. So all we needed to do was keep people interested, keep them coming back, and eventually they'd book. And that's what they did. And by the spring, people started booking. And then we knew we had something that was working. Of course, then other folks started to notice us, and then it became scary because then it became more of a competitive environment. But you take the good with the bad, I suppose.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what, building a marketplace, you said that you were spearheading that effort. There's also obviously multiple sides. What did you kind of figure out was the most non-obvious thing that is crucial to building a marketplace? You had a vision going into it, and then what did you end up learning that was non-obvious about it?
Well, I'm going to reserve the right to think about this a little more, and I might come up with a really, really exciting answer. But off the top of my head, what I remember is that you're building a marketplace. It's a two-sided marketplace, and we wanted to position ourselves as unique in the travel space as treating both sides of that marketplace with as customers, whereas the online travel the incumbent online travel agencies sort of treated the supply side as a necessary evil and really focused on the consumer side. We wanted to be different, and that's how we were positioning ourselves in the industry.
Sure.
So you sort of think as a marketplace, both sides, you need both sides. It's this chicken and egg kind of thing. And I think what we learned pretty quickly, despite really wanting to build for the industry side as well, is that if you don't have consumers and they're not booking, you don't have anything. And all you need to do is you need to do whatever you can to get consumers interested. And once they're interested, you can get the supply side interested just on the basis of there being interested consumers on the other side of the marketplace. So the key is figuring out how to keep the consumer side interested. And so we learned very quickly to put most of our effort into creating buzz around the consumers and creating an interesting visual appeal and doing something to make it sticky for the consumer side. And that included, making up hotels. We invented fake hotel. We knew people weren't going to be booking at the early stage. We just wanted to make it look really amazing and keep people excited and make it something they wanted to post on social about it and things like that. And so that became our focus for sure, which is not what we expected.
That's awesome. So it wasn't like the classic chicken and egg of which side of the marketplace. You guys knew that, hey, customers are what's going to attract everything else going forward.
I mean, we thought it was going to be this chicken and egg kind of thing.
Right.
You always think that going into a marketplace, but I think you always find, and I found this a few times now, whether through advising or through personal experience, it's seldom really literally a chicken and egg kind of conundrum when you're building a marketplace, even though it feels that way when you're getting started. There's usually a side you need to focus on in order to bring the other side over.
That's awesome. So I guess you had this product, you figured out that it was the customers, and you were working on basically getting that point of sale and having people buy things and book things. At what point did you realize that maybe you needed some outside help or investors or start to grow your company beyond this core team that was hacking together the product?
Well, we knew from the outset we were going to need external funding in order to realize our vision. We just didn't want to take that outside funding until we were sure we had something that was resonating. And obviously, once we had something that we had confidence that was resonating, if we could communicate that confidence to investors, we'd do a better deal. We'd get a better deal when we raised the money. And so we sort of forced ourselves to bootstrap as much as we could for the first several months. It was, I'd say we started in September. I think we raised our first round in March.
Wow.
And so, but another really nice thing that we did was we started those conversations with investors at the outset. From September, we were already having conversations with investors. And the way we played it was we said, hey, look, here's this thing that most people thought was nuts at the time, frankly. I mean, 9 out of 10 investors we spoke with thought we were crazy. Who's going to ever book a hotel same day? Or who's going to ever book a hotel on an app? That was really what we were getting. But for those who were willing to talk to us, we said, hey, we're not sure whether this thing has legs yet, but here are the metrics that we're looking for that are going to tell us that it has legs. And in that way, we sort of set the terms of the conversation with investors because they didn't know what the metrics should be. They didn't know what success should be. And we were we were giving them the metrics, and we were saying, hey, here's success. And lo and behold, then we hit those metrics, and they were like, wow, if this is successful, I want to be involved. And that really worked out really well for us.
That's awesome. I guess real quick for the audience, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put it in the Zoom chat. I have a couple of questions that we had pre-submitted, so we're going to go through those. That's what I'm going through right now, and then we'll go to the questions in the Zoom chat. So thanks y'all for sending those in. Sweet. So yeah, I mean that conveying to investors early on and then figuring it out, that's pretty awesome. What was, I guess, after that fact, you mentioned in like previous interviews, I was trying to watch all your stuff and figure out, what you've already talked about so you didn't have to repeat yourself. Well, you mentioned that in the past, some of the investors wanted you to focus on speed and you had to focus on quality. And so you grew a little bit slower than some investors wanted you to. Tell us a little bit more about your thought process there. And then in general, going from that, do you have advice for people that are currently entrepreneurs in dealing with investors in similar ways?
Yeah, I mean, there are. This is always the balance, I suppose, you have to walk when you take outside capital, particularly if you take venture capital, because venture capital is, the whole model is designed around finding some big hits among finding the needle in the haystack kind of thing, and paying for all your investments using, from that needle in the haystack that's so successful. And so you feel tremendous pressure from your VC investors to grow as fast as you can, because that's how they're going to determine what's fundable in subsequent rounds, and what's gonna be the breakout star, and where they're gonna put their attention. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the model. But as the business owner, you need to build a sustainable business that's going to work. And sometimes those two things are not totally compatible. And in our case, given we were a challenger brand entering a market that was pretty established, and established with giant players like Expedia in the US and Booking.com in Europe. These were folks that were orders of magnitude larger than us, had tremendous leverage with hotels. As a result, we knew we needed to position ourselves very, very differently in the market in order to get hotels to even answer our calls. The last thing I could go into detail about this, but the last thing any hotel wanted was another online travel agency. Let's put it that way. The relationships were not good. And so we needed to position ourselves very differently. In order to do that, we had to be really thoughtful. In my mind, the way you create a company starts with people. And if you hire the right people, you'll get the right product. If you get the right product, you'll get the right customers, et cetera, et cetera. But it starts with hiring the right people, having the right team around you. There's nothing you're going to be able to do if you don't do that. So we had to be very, very thoughtful about what people we wanted to surround ourselves with in order to build something that was truly differentiated and could truly break through the noise in our industry. And so we had to do a lot of things that we had to be just the fact that we were very thoughtful about hiring, for instance, slowed us down, because every market we launched required a team of people to run that market. And if we hadn't hired that team, we couldn't launch that market, and our growth was slowed. And we did counterintuitive things, like we refused to hire anybody from any other online travel agency, for instance. And we had a lot of people applying from those online travel agencies. But we knew that the way they'd been inculcated in a way to treat hotels that was not respectful and not the way we wanted to treat hotels. And it would be very difficult to retrain them to do things differently. We wanted to start fresh with people who we didn't need them to be travel experts. We just needed them to be very creative, thoughtful, hardworking, ambitious people. And we could train them on the travel side. So, we had rules like that also slowed us down. But all of these things, and this created tension with our investors and others who wanted to see us grow faster. But ultimately, we stuck to our guns. And this was, if you asked for advice that I would give to potential entrepreneurs with regard to how to deal with investors when your visions aren't totally in alignment, which is generally, the case at times.
Yeah.
The mistake that I've made, and I've seen others make in the past, investors are fantastic. They're really smart for the most part. If you choose well, they're really smart. They've got tremendous perspective. They see all sorts of different things. They can bring a lot of advice, but they're not gods, and they're not in your business every day. And so there's certain things that they're just not capable of weighing in on to the extent that you can, as the business owner or the management who's in it every day. And so you've got to be really careful to interact with your investors and treat them and value them for what they're valuable for, but not give them the keys to the kingdom, because that's not going to, they'll take the keys to the kingdom, but that's not necessarily the right thing to happen for the business. And so I've made that mistake in previous companies where I got so enamored of my investors that I would come to them in board meetings with questions like, what should I do here? Or what's the best move in this situation? And they'll have answers, and they're smart answers, but they're not necessarily the right answers. The better way to do it is to come to investors and say, hey, I've made the decision to do this. If you've got any feedback, I really want to hear it. if you've got any advice about this, I really want to hear it, but here's the decision. And it's creating that, it just creates a dynamic between the management and investors where it's the management's company to run and the investors are there to advise. And that's a healthy relationship. And that's the advice I would give. I give all the time to founders who are taking outside capital. It just keeps everyone in the right positions in order to grow the company.
Sweet. I guess another question about the HotelTonight days. When you kept on mentioning in this last answer, you were talking about culture alignment, whether that be with your sales teams, whether that be with your partnerships, whether that be internally with your investors. What was your team secret, you and your co-founder secret to having that culture kind of clear and strong from the get-go? And did you have any sort of techniques that really worked well in your process over the last couple of years at HotelTonight?
Yeah, this is the other thing that I feel like we're very proud of, and was born through previous mistakes that we had made, which is, and I go back to what I said earlier, it starts with people. And people talk about, culture as this thing that you can write in a book and, a list of commandments or something like that. And we're always going to work, make decisions this way or treat each other this way, or these are our values and all that. And maybe that's part of it. But at the end of the day, the culture is an organic thing that's created by the way the people who are working together work together and communicate and all of this. So there's only so much you can dictate about how that works. It's just a function of the personalities and the way the norms and the way people interact. And so the key is to add people to the team who are going to interact and comport themselves and work with others the way you think people should act and comport themselves. And so one of the, there's this cliche when you're starting companies that you have this product idea, you go out and raise some money, you get started, you put your heads down, get started working, and then you pick your heads up 6 months later, and you've got 50 people working around you, and you don't really know who they are, and how, you don't know if you like them or anything like that. And now you've got to create a culture, and you've got to retrofit this culture on this organization, and that never works. And so, in order to avoid that, what we're really proud of is, we came up with our product vision for this company, and immediately before we hired a person, we spent some time and came up with our people vision for the company. Who do we want to work around? What kind of people do we need here? What do we want this organization to feel like? What do we want it to look like? All that softer stuff that you generally don't take the time to do, or at least in my background, I hadn't spent much time thinking about that at the early stage. We spent that time. And then we were really maniacal about following those dictates. And it took the form of a list of values that were important to us. Nice. And when we were interviewing people, we made sure to interview every single person through the lens of those values, and be really, really maniacal about enforcing that and not letting anyone through that was sort of a compromise kind of candidate. One of the things that we did for a long time, a lot longer than you'd expect, that was another thing that slowed us down, was every hire needed to be unanimous among the interview team. I mean, unanimously excited. Everyone needed to be unanimously excited, not just unanimously, all right, fine, I guess, but unanimously I want to work around this person. Now that's nuts, and no HR person would tell you that that's a tenable way to do things. But it worked for us, even though it caused us to reject a lot of capable, fantastic people that just weren't perfect for us. And that's how we built the culture that we had, which I think was one of the strong suits of HotelTonight, and it continues to be one of the strong suits of HotelTonight. One of the reasons why Airbnb was such a great partner for us was because they had an equally strong, equally positive culture. And we talked to them for years and knew them very well and knew that the cultures were really compatible. So it became a very important part of the company.
That's awesome. I guess you led into Airbnb. So if you want to talk a little bit about what the process was in getting acquired, and when did you decide that, or I guess the co-founding team decided that would be the best next step of action for HotelTonight?
Well, look, we're down the street from them, and we'd been friends talking for years and years.
Yeah.
You know, at times it seemed like it could be a good fit. At times it didn't seem like it could be a good fit. At times they had other priorities. At times we had other priorities. And so by the time the deal happened, it was really just a sort of this aligning of everything where everyone's priorities were aligned at the time, and it seemed like a really good fit, and the timing seemed right, and all of that. It wasn't a magical, like, this is the best thing for us to do. You know, it wasn't like we had some sort of strategic process where we said, all right, here are all our alternatives at this moment in time, and one of them is talk to Airbnb. It was an organic thing that had happened over years, and it just sort of, the pieces fell into place, and it just made too much sense not to do.
Wait, before I guess opening it up for audience Q&A, we had one or two questions that were pre-submitted about your role at Kurai. And I guess just to help everybody understand, how did you decide, you know, healthcare was the next issue you wanted to tackle? I mean, it's such a big, I guess I would say, more encompassing problem than hotels and lodging and travel. So could you talk through, like, why Kurai, how Kurai, and I guess what is the day in the life of a president in Kurai today?
Yeah, well, a day in the life of a president of Kurai today is no longer, because I left Kurai a few weeks ago.
Oh man.
But it's a fantastic group of people that's going to do amazing things. For me, the reason why I joined is, you know, I was at this point after I left HotelTonight where I knew I wanted to start another company. And the reason why I wanted to start another company, primary reason, is I had some ideas that had been, you know, sort of banging around in my head for a few years that I couldn't get out of my head. And to me, that's a good reason to start something. But also because you know, whenever you do something, you make mistakes along the way. You think about ways you might want to do it better the next time. And I had some ideas for things I wanted to do a little bit differently. But at the same time, I also really, the one thing I haven't done in my career is do anything with any sort of social value, you know, social impact value. I had the, you know, great fortune to work on a number of really interesting business challenges and see some success with some of those business solutions we came up with. But I hadn't yet scratched that itch of doing something that had some sort of broader social impact for the world. And that's something I really wanted to do. Unfortunately, I didn't have any domain expertise in any area like, you know, education or healthcare or environment or anything like that. So I didn't feel like I had any credibility to come up with an idea to start a company. So I thought I'd have to choose either start my own thing, which was going to be a narrow business opportunity again, or join somebody else's thing that had some more social impact. And then I met the Kurai guys, and they'd been working on this AI research for a couple of years. And the concept was, you know, if we can try this novel machine learning concept and apply it to primary care medicine, we might be able to turbocharge doctors to such an extent. The main issue in the world with primary care is that there just aren't enough doctors to provide primary care to everyone in the world. And, you know, that manifests itself in terms of primary care being way too expensive and inaccessible for the majority of the world. And it's not a marginal problem. This isn't like we need 10% more doctors. It's like we need 1,000x more doctors.
Wow.
And so we're not going to solve this problem by hiring more doctors. The only way we'd solve it, or our feeling is, the way to solve it is through some sort of technology that turbocharges doctors to such an extent that we can close that gap. And they'd been researching some novel technology approaches for a couple of years and started to feel like they had some signal, some positive signal that showed that their approach was going to work. And now they needed someone to come in and figure out how to take this technology and turn it into a fully fledged business. So I was like, wow, this just feels like the best of all worlds for me. It's a perfect opportunity. And so I joined to build out that company. And ultimately, I have left mainly because I think I underestimated the degree of sophistication they had already achieved as an organization. Like I said, I get my energy at the very early stage where you're coming up with, you know, the core foundational concepts for how this company is going to act and be and do all that. I feel like a lot of that had already been done at Curai. And so it was something I really wanted to go even earlier stage. And that's ultimately why I've left. Not because I think that the business isn't going to be successful, or I think that the team isn't amazing. Both of those things I think are true, and I still am involved in the company.
That's awesome. Okay, so I guess moving on to the audience portion, a couple of y'all have texted or messaged me on Zoom, so I'm gonna just start saying names. Feel free to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and say your question. And I think we can go from there. So starting with Sam Ulu. And if not, I can just say your question as well. I'm not sure if some people cannot unmute or things like that. Okay, I'll just say Sam's question. So his question was about to do with building marketplaces, and he was asking, what was the main channel that drove your early customers? So was it partnerships? Was it just literally like cold emailing people, hiring people that had affiliations, or was it a lot of what was the main driver in driving early customer growth?
Well, when you think of a marketplace, there are two sets of customers. Right. So one are the consumers and one are the suppliers in our case, suppliers being hoteliers. What drove the suppliers was we worked really hard, like I said, to present ourselves to the industry as a friendly alternative. Like, here's a group you can work with that's actually going to be additive for your business and work with you to grow your business, as opposed to pounding you over the head with rules and dictates and requirements and those kinds of things, which is what they were used to. We also built our sort of offer for the supply side to be sort of an offer they couldn't refuse. Like, why would I pass this up? And what that means is it was zero cost in terms of money. It was zero cost in terms of effort. We felt like, this mobile thing was brand new, and a lot of hoteliers knew they had missed the boat on the web the first time around, and ceded all of that to the Expedias of the world. And they wanted to really be early adopters of this new mobile paradigm. And so we offered them the ability to get in and learn about mobile in a low cost, low friction kind of way. So everything we did was geared around making this a no-brainer for them. Like, why would you pass this up? It's free exposure, it's free learning, all of this kind of thing. So I'll give you an example, like the supply contract that we built, that hotelier had to sign in order to work with us. I stole the contract that we used to use at Orbitz, and that's what we initially used, as you do, right? But that contract is 20 pages long, and it's 5-point font, and it's full of legal mumbo jumbo that nobody understands and you're never going to need. And it was just the antithesis of the simplicity that we were trying to stand for. And so we ripped that up and we came up with a contract that was 14 sentences long, 1 page, full 10-point font, all English. Everybody could understand it. Our lawyers hated us for it, but it was the commercial statement we needed to make. And we used those contracts for probably, 5 or 6 years until we started adding a few more things to it, but it never got to, maybe got to 2 pages long. Anyway, that was the kind of, that was the way we approached the supply side. And by really reinforcing this notion that we were the friendly alternative, we got them to take a chance with us, and work with us and withstand a lot of pressure from the Expedias of the world, that we were blown away by the loyalty of the supply side of the marketplace. On the consumer side of the marketplace, really we created, and I credit Sam, our CEO, my co-founder, with creating a really kind of sexy buzz around what HotelTonight was, an aspirational feel to what this whole world of booking hotels spontaneously could mean, and what you can do, what this can mean for your life, and how much fun it could be, and how the app was beautiful at the time. This was really unique. It was like this beautiful, slick app that was just fun to use and really exciting to see what was on display, what was on offer today, that kind of thing. So there was that, and obviously, we had to deliver the goods in terms of inventory. And so the key for us was we felt like this needed to be drop dead simple for consumers. Like they needed to be able to book a hotel. They needed to be standing on a corner and be deciding whether they wanted to take a cab home or book a hotel. And in that split second, be able to book the hotel. And the price needed to be right. Like we needed to be able to offer them a deal that was compelling versus, booking a cab home kind of thing. And so, I could go into a lot of detail about how we locked in those, great deals. But that was what we really felt like we needed to do.
That's awesome. Okay, great. Next question is from Lucius. So feel free to unmute and go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Hey, Jared, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us about your experience and journey. So I'm, a student at UT studying business and information systems, and I'm also interested in becoming a founder as well. And I kind of want to know, how did you validate your idea before launch? So in that, 2 to 3 month period in September to December, what did you do to say, hey, this seems like something we should keep building on before you actually put something out to market?
We took people's temperature in terms of gauging the buzz that we got from posts that we were putting out there and whatnot. But like I said earlier, we're of the belief that there's very little you can know until something is actually out there. And so the path we took was, rather than trying to run some sort of test or something like that to determine whether people might be interested, what we decided to do was try to limit the cost of rolling out a full-scale offering, and so that we could actually get the full-scale offering out there. And so that's, we felt like we'd get a better read by just getting it out there. So that's why we time-bounded ourselves to 3 months. We bootstrapped it so we wouldn't spend too much money, and it forced some really, really difficult decisions. There's lots of stuff that we thought that was going to be in the app that didn't make it into the app because we just didn't have the time and or the resources and or the talent to build at the time. And, it ultimately proved to not be all that important to have that stuff in the app. So that's what I would suggest, is figure out a way. The best case scenario is, it's not always possible, but the best case scenario is figure out a way to launch a full version. And I say full in quotes because it's going to be some sort of MVP, but something that actually customers can come in and actually purchase the product and go through the whole life cycle of the relationship that you're trying to create. And that's the best way to figure out whether you've got something.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Lucius, for your question. Next question is from KK. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute, if you want to go ahead. Okay. So I can just read the question out loud then. It's in the chat. How do you view Roofstock and their institutional platform? Not sure what Roofstock is, but.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Okay. I guess we can circle back to it if they want to.
Sorry, KK.
Yeah, that's fine. We can circle back to that. Next question from Jaydeep, if you want to unmute and ask.
Okay, cool. Hey, Jared. So a quick question that I had, would you say one of the reasons that you guys decided to launch as mobile app only was to sort of like avoid the ridiculously high bidding wars on Google ad spots with like not only OTAs, but meta search as well? Or was it purely to like deliver, completely different booking, like a booking opportunity for a consumer? So like, was it like a little bit of both?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in hindsight, I could tell a little revisionist history, but the reality was the sort of acquisition economics was a beautiful outgrowth of the decision to go mobile only. It wasn't the other way around. Our decision to do mobile only was because we knew that there were the market for full purpose online travel agencies was full. This is a mature market that existed. We weren't going to try to out Expedia. So what we really wanted to try to do was we found this niche that was unfilled, which was same day hotel bookings. And our feeling was same day hotel bookings is something that you do when you're on the go. You woke up this morning, you didn't expect to stay in a hotel tonight. The only reason you're staying in a hotel is because your plans have somehow shifted and a hotel is either necessary now or it could be better for whatever reason. But it wasn't something you expected to do and you're not sitting in front of your computer necessarily. And so mobile felt like the platform that made the most sense for us to do this. And it's my belief that the best way, an entrepreneur's best friend is some sort of technological or paradigm shift that's happening, that's bigger than you, that you can jump on board and be the first to colonize this new thing. And for us, that was mobile. There weren't any mobile apps out there. The only one that had recently gotten started was Uber. That was mobile only commerce app. And so we knew this would force focus on us. It would force us to be true to the niche that we were trying to fill. And as a result, we found that acquisition was like this wild west in terms of customer acquisition, and nobody had figured out how to acquire customers on mobile. So we were able to, that's one of the hardest things in consumer travel, is to figure out how to get distribution, because these guys, the Expedias of the world have these enormous Google budgets, and there's no way we could compete with them. But nobody had figured out yet how to acquire customers on mobile. And as a result of us being the first and being a pure play in there, and being in San Francisco, frankly, where we were down the street from these platforms, whether they be Apple or Twitter or Facebook or whomever, we're trying to build these ad marketplaces. We found that we were invited in to participate in these early betas of how these marketing platforms work. So we were able to sort of carve out these beachheads for ourselves that ultimately dissipated when the big guys figured it out and the marketplaces got more, got more populated and all that. But we were able to get some really early traction in a space that was devoid of any advertisers, and it really worked out well for us.
Gotcha. I had a follow-up question. Am I allowed to ask that, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Just kind of on that note, how long was it until you guys saw the OTAs also start offering a mobile solution? And did they ever start also kind of moving into this last minute inventory, like basically the incremental inventory that you guys were going into? And like, did that affect, if they did, like, did that affect essentially your user base? Like, did they take away users from you guys?
Yeah, this was a really interesting learning for us, because it took less time than we expected for them to catch on to the potential here. So like I mentioned, we shipped to the App Store in December of 2010. We officially launched in January of 2011. And by the fall, by October, maybe September. No, it was probably early. Well, maybe September. We were starting to hear rumblings from our hotel partners that Expedia and Booking.com, or the two big kahunas, they were starting to talk about their launch of a similar type of app. And so, of course, we freaked out and sort of battened down the hatches, figuring this was going to be an onslaught. But what we learned was, first of all, the relationships that we had built with hotels allowed us to withstand the pressure that the hotels, that Expedia and the others put on the hotels. The other thing was, by staying focused on what we do, which was pure incremental sales channels for hotels, we were able to convince the hotels to offer us economics that they still weren't even willing to offer to the Expedias and whatnots, because the Expedias of the world, we couldn't offer them this pure play incremental distribution channel. And the Expedias of the world didn't know how to sort of distribute different deals to different platforms within their universe. And so, even though we had no business getting these great deals from hotels, given the volume we were sending their way versus, say, an Expedia, we were able to offer them a safe place to distribute this distressed inventory at a discount. And so we were still able to sort of offer our customers the goods, and essentially better quality inventory, cheaper prices. And so we were able to keep consumers. And so we didn't feel like we lost consumers as a result of the big guys coming in. The other thing that was really important was, look, if you're a big company and you've got a cash cow that's working for you, you know, there's the innovator's dilemma is a real thing. It's really hard to put a whole lot of time and energy and resource into this new little niche thing that you're not sure is going to be big and looks like it's just going to cannibalize business from your main source of income. And so the apps that these big guys came out with, you know, they had tons of resources and tons of smarts and talent, whatever in-house, but the apps sucked. And they were mainly just rehashes of the core Expedia app or the core Booking.com app. And that doesn't work for this last minute, you know, platform. You know, HotelTonight was all about a streamlined experience where you could book a hotel in 3 taps. There's no way you could do that on any Expedia app. And they tried. I mean, these guys all, there were multiple rounds of apps that they would launch. They would launch them and then they would quickly kill them, and then they would launch a different one and they would kill it, and they would and every time they did it with, you know, a lot of fanfare. Booking.com bought a billboard outside our office once. Just to mess with us. I mean,
Wow.
and psychologically it was terrifying, but these things never worked because they weren't purpose built for what they were trying to do. And so we were able to keep our customers and hotels as a result of all that.
Got it. Cool. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, JD. Okay, so KK clarified in the Zoom chat that Roofstock is a marketplace for residential properties. So right now, because of COVID, mortgage debt is cheap, and they were just wondering, how do you see the space playing out? I'm not sure that's a lot to go on, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know much about that space, but I'm a big fan of marketplaces if done right, for sure. And residential real estate seems like a great area to be disrupted.
Sweet. On a similar question, one that we had written a little bit earlier was, how do you see like marketplace kind of startups in 2020? Do you think that it's like entering the last mile of marketplace startups, as a lot of people have been talking about, or do you think that there's a lot of room for more marketplaces to be done right?
Well, I mean, I think wherever there are, you know, suppliers of a product and consumers of a product, and it's hard for the suppliers to reach the consumers, there's room for somebody to help broker that. It's not a question of whether, I mean, marketplace as a thing, I don't think has a beginning or an end. So I don't think there's like a marketplace industry that is tapped out. You know, that doesn't make sense to me. It's a question of, to me, when I think of a marketplace, I think about coming up with creative ways to create win-wins for two different parties in any kind of transaction. And I'm a big believer that there are always ways to expand the pie in those kinds of situations if you're really creative about it. And so for that reason, I think that this marketplace concept can be applied in a lot of different areas. And I'm a big fan of figuring out how to apply it in all of those areas, many of which, you know, haven't been thought of yet.
Great, that makes sense. Okay, next question is from Grant Heimer. If you want to unmute me, get that permission.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Jared. Appreciate it. Question was, were there any unique marketing strategies or partnerships or promotions that resulted in outsized success compared to anything else that you ever tried?
Well, I think that, I mean, we had, I don't know that there was any particular tactic that resulted in outsized success, in the sense that, hey, we put a ton of money into Facebook and it worked for us like nothing else worked for us. I mean, all of these things worked for us for a time until they didn't work for us. The key was, I think, being nimble and continuing to cycle through these things and iterate and not getting married to anything in particular. And that was just a discipline that we had in the organization. We were able to, we try all sorts of different things. I think the big thing that really worked for us was not a tactic so much as it was the DNA of the company, which was everything was funneled into building a world-class product. And the product, the requirements on our product in terms of look and feel and usability and just fun and pizzazz and, you know, all of those things, like all that softer stuff that you can't really write into requirements, it was all part of the product design and development process here. So, I mean, product meetings were really, really frustrating for a lot of people at our company because the feedback wasn't always super usable, frankly. It wasn't always like super tangible. It was just like, nope, you don't have the magic yet, you know, that kind of thing. But constantly being focused on that was the best marketing we could do, particularly in this world where people were, you know, sort of tiptoeing into mobile and weren't sure whether they would trust the roof over their head tonight to, you know, some mobile app. We needed to you know, wow them with how professional and how solid this thing was. And that's the best marketing we could do. Then we started to get a lot of great sort of virality and word of mouth that really helped us. I think it all came down to just building a quality product.
Awesome, thank you.
Sweet. A question got submitted. In 2020, do you think it makes sense to start a career by founding or a career in entrepreneurship specifically, by trying to found a company, joining somebody else's company, working in industry first? What do you think is kind of the best starting ground in order to get into technology, get into startups, get into entrepreneurship?
Well, my advice might be a little contrarian. I'm not sure if this is the same advice that others would give, but I'm not a big believer in entrepreneurship for entrepreneurship's sake. You know, I just like, I don't think the best reason to start a company is because I want to start a company. The best reason, that is certainly a good reason, that should be a part of the mix. You shouldn't start a company if you don't want to deal with the headache of starting a company. But the primary reason for starting a company is because you've identified a need in the world, like some sort of pain among some sort of customer that you can fix uniquely. And so if you've identified that pain, so the key is, if you've determined that you want to be involved in things at the very early stage and you're willing to deal with that kind of chaos and you thrive in that kind of environment, which is a unique environment and isn't right for everybody. If you've determined that, then you know you want to be in an early stage environment. The question about whether to start your own thing or join somebody else's thing is really all about who has the best idea that resonates with you in terms of, hey, here's a real pain that needs solving in the world. And as long as you stay focused on solving that pain, you could see some success. But if you're a solution looking for a problem, I think that's a tough road.
Solution looking for a problem. That's a good way to put it.
Well, hey, look, I think a lot of companies get started as, hey, look, I want to start a company and I see some sort of technicality here that I can take advantage of right now and maybe make some money.
Sure.
That's you know, maybe that works for a little while, but it's not a recipe for great success.
Makes sense. Nick, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think my question dovetails well off of the last question, where that was, you know, kind of focused around what to do, you know, when you're starting your career. And my question is, for a student who's in school today, with, you know, resources of a student and, you know, having more opportunities and different things they could go do, whether it be the classroom or, you know, start a company or work for a startup or go party, you know, what do you think is important? You know, if you do know you want to build companies and you know, in the future, like, where do you spend your time? How do you prioritize your time as a student?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would say the best way to learn what it's going to be like and what kinds of situations you might face and sort of how to make those kinds of decisions is to get involved with those situations. So if you can get involved at an intern level or as some sort of employee level with some startup that's happening around you, to me, that's the best education you can possibly have. There's no question that learning, you know, the fundamentals of strategy and those kinds of things, like more in a more academic context, is valuable. And look, I went and got my MBA, and I think it was a fantastic experience. There's no substitute for real world experience, particularly if you want to start a company. You can intellectualize what starting a company is all about, but there's no way you can appreciate it until you're actually in those trenches and you see what it's all about. There's just no way. And so to me, if you feel like that is a path you might want to go down, the best thing you can do is go offer your services to somebody who's doing it. And any entrepreneur out there who's got a company that they're trying to get off the ground is probably cash strapped, resource strapped. And so some cheap college labor, no offense, would be, who's going to turn that down, right? I know I wouldn't turn that down. And that experience is second to none, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Now, the one corollary to that I would add, Nick, is if suppose what you want, what sort of product you want to build. You're already passionate about a particular problem that needs solving, and you have an idea, or maybe you don't have the idea yet, but you've just identified the problem in the world that you think there should be a solution for. Then there might be some value in not joining just a general startup, or maybe doing that, but joining some sort of company or something that's adjacent to that problem, or in the area of that problem, where you can learn more about the problem from people who are really in deep doing something close to it, or something similar. That sort of domain knowledge could be really valuable as well. That's only if you've already determined, what area you want to focus on.
Sure, makes sense. Next question coming in is, you mentioned post your MBA when you knew you wanted to go into entrepreneurship or go into technology startups and early stage technology in general, the world was kind of crumbling and traditional options weren't that available. We're in a similar kind of world setting right now, I guess. COVID has disrupted a lot of job capabilities. What are the parallels you kind of see there in terms of, are there specific opportunities similar to how when you founded HotelTonight, you were thinking of mobile as the next frontier? Do you think there are similar frontiers today that aspiring entrepreneurs, investors, people that are looking for a new kind of next level industry should look at? And what are the other parallels, maybe if you have any?
Yeah, that's a very big question. I mean, the answer is, of course, there's always, time
Sure.
marches forward. There's always progress. There are always, things are getting, the world is changing, and change creates opportunity. And so the key is looking for where those changes are happening, those things that are changing in the world that are going to change the way we behave or the way we interact with each other. I think everything that's happening with the environment, I think there's a lot of opportunity to get involved. I mean, this is cliche. It's nothing insightful, but just, you look at, electric cars. The fact that electric cars are coming is going to change the way we go get gas. It's going to change the way we, do this and that. The fact that cars are going to be autonomous is going to change the way we park. It's going to change. There's just so many things that change as a result of these fundamental platform shifts that are happening. All of those create opportunities. All of those are going to create problems, and those problems are going to have solutions. So I just think looking out for all of those things. I mean, there's just tons of stuff out there.
Sweet. I think Jaydeep had a similar question about COVID implications, but back to the hotel industry. You can unmute, or I can read your question out loud. Up to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So kind of on the topic of COVID, I mean, where do you think hotels go from here? Because I mean, business travel has been decimated. Leisure travel is not expected to pick up for a while. So do you think hotels start relying a lot more heavily on like incremental revenue streams? Like I know a couple of them are turning rooms into like co-working spaces. There's a couple startups that offer day use hotels. So do you think that starts like they almost start pivoting to that, or do you just think that a lot more hotels are going to continue shutting down?
Well, I think the answer is yes to all of that. I think that you're sitting on a big fixed asset. You've got to get some revenue in the door. The most successful folks who weather the storm are going to get creative about how they leverage that fixed asset in order to get revenue in the door. And there are halls, they're rooms. There's all sorts of things you can do in rooms. And so the key is figuring out how you can monetize some of those things that you do in the rooms. Of course, I do think they're going to be hotels that don't weather the storm. And that's a shame for sure. But there's plenty of opportunity, I think, to be had. And hopefully, this won't go on too much longer. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thanks.
Great. Next question from Lucius.
Awesome. I've got two quick ones. The first one is that, given the market that we're in, with a lot of hotels struggling and trying to figure out how to get back into, being profitable or at least making money, do you think that makes these hotels, more inclined to work with different startups? Or do you think they're probably, more adverse to that and trying to make any dollar they can and retaining all of the earnings versus giving that out to some sort of partner?
I think that when you're talking about a B2B kind of play, the one mistake that a lot of people fall into is they think about the interests of the business as the only interest to think about. The reality, so to your question, of course, if a hotel is losing money and needs to figure out how to get creative, logically they should find every avenue they possibly can to get creative and work with as many people as they possibly can if those people are offering them, the ability to get into the black, for instance. The problem is that is actually accomplished by the people on the ground. So at a hotel, there's a person who enters all the inventory into all the different systems, and that's that person's day every day, and works with all the distribution sites. And one of the mistakes I think people make is they make a great case for why the business should work. If we were HotelTonight, I could tell a great story about why hotels should work with us because it's going to help your bottom line, and et cetera, et cetera. If that doesn't matter or resonate with the person on the ground who's actually doing the work, then it doesn't matter how beautiful my PowerPoint is to the general manager of the hotel. The key is to figure out ways to make this something that's going to make that person's life better. Now, what does that person want? Well, that person wants to come into work every day, get their work done without working too hard, get a bonus, enjoy life. And so how can we make their day, better, more interesting, more fun, more exciting? That's the key thing to think about. And I think that's what a lot of businesses, when you're starting to build a business that's trying to sell something to other businesses, I think that's an easy thing to forget about. It's something we worked really hard to build at HT, which was, hey, we want this to be enjoyable for the reservations clerk who's actually working with this, because that's the person who's ultimately gonna pay our bills.
That makes sense. Awesome. And then, is there anything that you would have changed thinking back to very early on in HotelTonight about what you did?
Oh, yes. That's a whole other session. The only way you can ever be successful in life is if you recognize where you've gone wrong or are always trying to get better, right? And so certainly that was if you're comfortable with the level, with what you've achieved, and you feel like you've done it perfectly, you're probably not going to be successful for very long. There are plenty of things that I felt like we did wrong along the way. I mean, wrong is the wrong way to put it. There are things I think we could have done better along the way, and there are probably also things that we did wrong. Everyday things, big strategic things, all sorts of things. I mean, luckily we did enough that we were able to see success. There's nothing about that company that couldn't have been made better. And that was one of the core values that we actually that we set out early on when I said we came up with that people strategy. We wanted to hire people who looked at things that way, like looked at things with a critical mind, were never satisfied with the status quo, didn't accept the way we did things at HotelTonight. We didn't want people who were going to come in here and say, wow, these guys know what they're doing, I'm just going to do it their way. We wanted people to come in and say, you know what, this has worked, but here's a better way. And as a result of finding those people who thought critically about everything, we had a really critical thinking sort of environment where we were constantly trying to improve everything. There were no sacred cows at the company, and I think that's important. And so, yeah, I could go on for a long time about everything I feel like we could have done better, because it's basically everything.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lucius. That was a very planned to way of saying critical thinking makes a business run. Okay, so we have around 5 to 10 minutes left. I want to ask a couple of forward-looking questions, and then maybe a couple of fun questions too before signing off. Again, if anybody has any audience questions, or Lucius, do you have one again? Okay, sweet. Then feel free to interrupt me in the midst of this, or me and Jared. Real quick, so you just are no longer president of Curai, but you were super passionate about social impact. Is that something you see yourself doing next, going into more maybe early stage social impact startup?
I would love to. Yeah, I'm still very, very interested in it. And the nice thing is now, after having spent 1.5 years in healthcare, I find that I actually do have some domain expertise now in healthcare. And you know, I've been able to see firsthand where there are inefficiencies there. And, you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say that there are plenty. And so there's lots to be done, and I hope that I can stay in that field and do something different.
Sweet. A lot of the audience that's here and is going to watch it, some of the replays when we put it out, is going to be students, people that are not even interested in companies in general, but could just be interested in the fields that you've worked in and operated in. You mentioned you're a lifelong learner. What are some of the things you do right now to continue learning, reading, podcasts, things that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm a voracious reader of the news. I subscribe to more newspapers than I can count, and magazines and whatever. I like to keep up on everything. For me, I view it not only as sort of my I don't know, duty as a citizen in the world to be educated about that stuff, but also, you know, I'm always thinking about ideas, and the way I think about ideas is I'm reading things that are random, that are going on in the world, and it sparks some sort of thought about, hey, how would this apply to this situation, or where there seems to be a gap here that could be filled. That's not necessarily the intent, but that's the result, and so that's really important to me. In terms of podcasts, I really love podcasts, but I'm not a disciplined podcast listener. And so there's no particular podcast that I listen to religiously, unfortunately. Sure. And that's just because I can't keep them all straight. Yeah, just tons of reading about everything that's going on in the world.
That's awesome. I guess a couple of fun questions. I'm sure you have to travel a little bit as part of your jobs. Where's been your favorite place to go to?
Oh, that's like asking you to choose among your children. That's just an unfair question.
Let's say domestic or international.
My wife and I have sort of this ratio of travel where we really love going to new places and just completely foreign places. So a lot of foreign travel, but there needs to be a balance, because we can't do too much of that because it's hard travel. It's very tiring travel to do that. So we maintain this sort of like 2-to-1 ratio. So for every 2 international trips we do, we do one easy domestic trip that's just fun.
Nice.
But the best, I'd say, you know, after I left HotelTonight, my wife left her job as well, and we were able to do some travel. We traveled for several months around Southeast Asia, and that trip just kept getting longer and longer, and we were visiting more and more countries. And I would say that, you know, that's now a few years ago, but that's going to be the highlight, I think, for a long time.
That's awesome. And I guess, are you, now that you've been acquired, are you like, when you go travel internationally or domestically, do you stay in Airbnbs or hotels?
Well, I am a hotel fan. I love hotels. It's going to be very difficult to disavow me of that. And so I'm just happy that Airbnb is now selling hotels, so that now I can be a team player.
Nice. That's awesome. And I guess this is a question we love to ask all our Fireside Chat guests, because we're obviously a student fund focusing on students that are doing some sort of entrepreneurship. You've mentioned a lot of lessons that you've learned in your real life journey with founding companies, operating, advising companies. What's a lesson that you think sticks out for a student investors, student entrepreneurs going forward?
I mean, if I were, first of all, like, it's so fantastic that you have, that Genesis exists and these kinds of resources exist. I don't know if they existed when I was in school at Texas. Maybe they did, but I certainly didn't know about them.
We're pretty recent.
Okay, so I mean, it's just so fantastic that this kind of thing exists. And I would certainly say, at a minimum, avail yourself of all of these opportunities, particularly while you're there in Austin, because it gets tougher once you have a career and have a job and whatever, and you're tired at the end of the day. If I were sitting in your shoes, the thing that has always exasperated me is when people talk about, hey, what was your career path, or what is your career path, or what's your plan in 5 years or 10 years, or that kind of thing. And I don't know how many people are asking you guys that, or I don't know how often you have to answer that kind of question. But I would hope that my advice to you would be to forget about all of that and do whatever you're passionate about right now. And as soon as you're not passionate about whatever you're doing, do something different that you're passionate about. And the more you can stay disciplined against that. And of course, there are all sorts of real world pressures that come to bear. You have debt, you have all these things, you got to earn a salary, all those things. And I'm certainly not trying to gloss over those things. They're real. But the more you can try to compartmentalize those things and say, hey, I should be doing whatever makes me really excited to get up every morning. I should be doing that right now. And if I've gotten to the point where I no longer feel that way, then I should do something different. And eventually, if you keep piecing together those kinds of experiences, it will get you to somewhere amazing. It always does. And then you can tell a story about how you knew all along that was the direction you wanted to go in. To me, that's the recipe for having success in your career and being happy at the same time. That's what I would urge all of you to do.
Sweet. With that, Jared, it's been really great having you here as our Fireside Chat guest. Thank you so much for all the attendees, the people that are going to watch it later. Just to reemphasize, Genesis is the UT Austin Startup Fund. We give pre-seed capital. We don't take equity. And we give it on the range of up to $15,000 for early stage startups at UT Austin. We also provide mentorship, guidance, advising, incubation, and really want to see UT entrepreneurs succeed and more people take that path. I think there's a couple of questions in the Zoom chat. Best way to get in touch with Jared? Are you on Twitter? Do you want to publicize anything, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter may be the best way.
Sure.
It's just Jared G. Simon. Oh no, it's actually Jared Simon now. I forgot we changed it.
Nice.
Jared Simon, it's easy. It's easy.
Okay, so that's twitter.com/Jared Simon, and best way to get in touch with him. Thank you to everybody that showed up from UT, from beyond. Stay in touch with Genesis. We're planning to have more of these fireside chats going forward. And we're really excited to have guests like Jared, who's both a Longhorn alum and a great entrepreneur, as you guys heard today. So that's it for me. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you all.
And actually, wait, before everybody leaves, can we get like a gallery view of everybody, and we can put up the hook and sign for a screenshot real quick. So I guess put that hook and symbol up. Turn on your cameras if you have them. If not, give everybody like 10 seconds. Okay, I think that's enough. All right, so in 3, 2, 1, hook 'em. Okay, I got a screenshot. 1 second, gonna save that real quick. Great, thank you so much again, Jared. Thank you everybody that showed up, and we'll publish this on YouTube later if you want to share it with your friends, talk about it, refer back to it. I think there's some great content in there. So have a good one, everyone. Good night. Going to end the meeting.